The Long Drive. Chapter 1. The shortcut. It was supposed to be an easy trip. Clara had driven this route a dozen times before, 5 hours from the city to her family's cabin deep in the woods. She was familiar with every twist of the highway and every gas station along the way. But this time, as dusk fell earlier than expected, her GPS offered her an alternative route, a shortcut through a narrow, unmarked road. Say 45 minutes, the robotic voice insisted. Her phone buzzed with low battery warnings, and she cursed herself for forgetting her charger. The thought of shaving time off the drive was tempting, especially with night creeping in. Against her better judgment, Clara turned onto the dark, unlit road. The trees loomed closer here, their branches clawing at the sky. Her headlights seemed swallowed by the void ahead. There was no traffic, no streetlights, only her car, the road, and the eerie hum of the engine. As Clara drove deeper into the woods, strange sensations settled over her, like the air had grown heavier. She adjusted her rearview mirror and froze. A shadow passed across the back seat, quick, fleeting. She spun around. Nothing. Her heartbeat quickened. "Just my imagination," she whispered, but her voice sounded thin, unsure. Chapter 2. The first stop, after what felt like hours, Clara spotted a dim light ahead. Relief washed over her. It was a gas station, decrepit and barely lit, but it was something. She pulled in and stepped out, the gravel crunching underfoot. The place was eerily quiet and no attendant, no other cars. She tapped on the glass window of the small shop. "Hello?" No answer. She turned back to the pump, trying to shake the growing unease. As she filled her tank, her eyes drifted to the edge of the forest behind the station. There was movement, something low to the ground, shuffling. A chill ran down her spine as she realized it wasn't an animal. It was a person. Their limbs were bent at unnatural angles, the head tilted too far back, as if sniffing the air. Clara froze, the gas pump still in her hand. Slowly, the figure turned toward her, revealing hollow eyes and a slack-jawed grin. Before she could scream, her car door slammed shut. She whipped around. The back door was ajar. Chapter 3. The stranger. Panicking, Clara jumped into the car and locked the doors. Her hands shook as she gripped the wheel, glancing back at the forest. The figure was gone. She floored the gas pedal, speeding down the narrow road. Her breaths came in shallow bursts, her mind racing. After a few miles, her headlights illuminated a figure standing in the middle of the road. She slammed the brakes, tires screeching. It was a man, dressed in a tattered coat, his face pale and gaunt. He held up his hands as if to wave her down. Clara hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to drive away, but he looked desperate. Against her better judgment, she rolled down the window a crack. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Please," he rasped. "You have to leave. It's not safe here." "What's not safe?" Clara demanded. The man's eyes darted behind her, wide with terror. "It follows the road. It's already too late." Before she could ask what he meant, he bolted into the woods. Clara's hands shook as she rolled up the window and drove off, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. Chapter 4. The chase. The road seemed endless, the trees closing in tighter around her. The GPS had long stopped working, and her phone's battery had died. Clara was completely alone, or so she thought. Her rearview mirror caught movement again. This time, it wasn't fleeting. A figure was in the back seat. Clara's scream echoed in the car as she swerved violently. The car spun out, tires skidding off the road and into a shallow ditch. The headlights flickered, then died, plunging her into darkness. Heart racing, Clara turned slowly. The back seat was empty. She fumbled for her flashlight and shone it around the car. The beam of light caught a handprint smeared across the inside of the rear window, long, spindly fingers dripping with something dark. Then came the knock. Soft, rhythmic on the driver's side window. Clara didn't dare look. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. Finally, she turned the flashlight toward the window. A face stared back at her, grinning impossibly wide, its teeth jagged and glistening. Chapter 5. The cabin. Clara scrambled out of the passenger side and ran blindly into the woods, branches tearing at her clothes. Her lungs burned, but she didn't stop. Somewhere in the distance, she saw a faint lighthouse, maybe. The cabin. She burst through the door, slamming it behind her. The familiar scent of wood smoke and pine brought a fleeting sense of safety. But as she turned to lock the door, she froze. The windows were wide open, the curtains fluttering like someone had left in a hurry. The cabin felt wrong. A floorboard creaked behind her. Slowly, Clara turned. The figure stood in the shadows, its grin visible even in the dim light. "You shouldn't have come here," it whispered. The last thing Clara saw was its outstretched hand, impossibly long fingers reaching for her face. Epilogue. Weeks later, a ranger found Clara's car abandoned on the side of the road. No trace of her was ever discovered, only the word "welcome" carved into the dirt on the back window, written in shaky, blood-red letters.